All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on The Conduit. As you know, on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. is our housing discussion. And we always have a really good discussion. And in week two, which is this is where we're at, we do a deep dive. And today we're going to get into Kitsap County's HEART program. And that stands for the Homeless Encampment Action Response and Transitions. And we have a lot of fine folks here to join us. And so I'm going to bring them up with no further ado. Matt, how are you doing today?
Good. Glad to be here, Marwan. Always excited to talk housing.
Absolutely. Good to see you. Kirsten, how are you doing today?
Oh man, I'm good. I'm it's amazing how fast the second Wednesday of the month has already rolled around again. It feels like we were just talking last week. So happy to get back to the second Wednesday of the month.
Well, as always, we know how tremendously busy you are. And so we are very thankful whenever you can carve out time to join us. So thank you so much for that. And our super special guest today is Jared Moran. And he is our Kitsap County's HEART coordinator. How are you doing, Jared?
I'm well. How are you?
I am blessed and highly favored. So, as I said today, our conversation is centered around the HEART program. So, let me go ahead and put that in there. It's a big acronym, but it's actually a pretty great name: Homeless Encampment Action, Response, and Transitions. And so, Jared, I'd love to start with you. Would you just tell us, what is the HEART program?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually like how Kristen explains it the most. So I want to defer to her on that.
Well, thank you. That's nice. Jared is still relatively new to this new position and definitely learning the ropes. I always like to start with a little bit of history. So we, even before the pandemic, we at the county started to notice that there was an increase in the number of encampments around the county, and we were getting an increased number of calls from concerned residents of the county about encampments. And so even before the pandemic, we started working with our county legal team on what could we do around encampment response. And there's a lot of fairly complex case law, which means like legal decisions from court cases that govern what we're allowed to do. A lot of that got postponed during the pandemic because we didn't really understand the case law well enough yet to understand how to implement a policy. And more importantly, the Centers for Disease Control recommended that we not displace people who were living in encampments because that would sort of potentially further the spread of COVID. And so we wanted to make sure people had a safe place to stay. So there wasn't a lot that happened during the pandemic years. And then just at the end of last year, we kind of reconvened and finalized that policy, which is called the Unauthorized Encampments on Kitsap County Response Policy. And that policy kind of outlines what we are allowed to do legally and kind of what our county intentions are around responding to encampments. And in that policy, which was approved by our commissioners last November of 2021, the policy kind of outlines a new position for the county, which is the HEART coordinator and the HEART program. The policy is really focused on, our motto is leading with compassion. So the policy is focused on leading with compassion, but ensuring that there's a compassionate, consistent, and coordinated response to encampments on Kitsap County public land. So that new HEART position was put out for, job applicants, and we found a wonderful respondent in Jared. Jared can tell you a little bit about his background, but he joined us, I think, a little less around 2 months ago, I think, and has really just dived into the position. His role is to do a couple of different things. The first is to coordinate the different county departments that have an interest in encampment. So sometimes the different county departments have responsibility for different pieces of parcels of land. So the Parks Department, for example, has responsibility for parks, and we have Stormwater Department has property that is used for stormwater. We have the department, the Public Works Department has county road rights of way. So there's just a whole bunch of different pieces of property that are sort of managed or administered by different county departments. And different county departments also have a different role in responding to encampment. So our solid waste division, for example, responds with garbage pickup, garbage. So the HART coordinator's job is to coordinate all these different departments within the county who have a response to encampments, but also to coordinate those departments with our larger community partners, like the Kitsap Public Health District, Kitsap Community Resources, our school districts, and others that have also have a role or a piece to play in encampment response. So doing that coordination is really important. And then also working with a group of kind of an advisory committee made up of representatives of all those different partners to develop a response to different encampments that we are aware of. Each one requires a very special personalized response. There isn't like a one size fits all. It really depends on the situation. And so Jared also responds to complaints or concerns from residents of the county about encampments, often going out and doing an assessment of what's actually happening. And then trying to implement a response if we decide on a particular course of action. Jared coordinates all of those efforts. So I hate to be putting words in your mouth, Jared, but you asked me to give an overview, and that's the best I can do off the top of my head.
That's actually why I wanted you. That was perfect. That's couldn't have said
Jared,
it better myself.
Tell us who you are. You know, where you came from. What about the HART coordinator position appealed to you, and you know, what are your kind of goals and directives that you're hoping to achieve?
Yeah. So grew up in California, and my dad saw a need as a little kid to take us to a homeless shelter, and we served meals there growing up every weekend from as little as I can remember, probably like 5 or 6, until we moved out of California. And I loved it. I loved because I'm a lucky guy. I got to go to private school and had a very nice upbringing, and it helped me see that it's not all like that. Not everybody has what I had growing up, and I'm very grateful and very lucky and privileged to live the life that I've been able to live. But there's more to it, and serving people is always been a part of who I am. Did college right out of high school, and then 9/11 happened, and I was like, yeah, no, this isn't right. Let's go serve. And so I joined the military and served in the Navy in the medical department. Got attached to the Marine Corps, and met my wife, and we moved back to Washington State, and then went back to school, got my degrees, and then started out as a counselor on McNeil Island at the Special Commitment Center, working with sexually violent predators, and which was an amazing start for someone who's trying to learn about mental illness, and because they have every mental illness is presented out there. I got to, it was great. So after that, I wanted to grow. And so I decided to go work for Adult Protective Services. And I started as an investigator in Kitsap County, became very familiar with this area. And again, I'm very into personal growth, and decided, let's see what we could do. And I became the supervisor for centralized intake. And so all the intakes in the whole state came through us, and which helped with, like learning about risk management and managing risk appropriately, and just helping out. And then I saw this position posted and just was like, yep, that's me. I've never been so attracted to a position ever than when I read the job posting. And I had a horrible interview. I thought I did, I'm very critical of how I interview. I did not do well, but I think that my compassionate side must have came through in the interview, and I've just been lucky ever since. And working for the county so far, what a great group of people I get to work with every day. And our outreach team that I get to work with, they're awesome. And yeah.
So tell us what about, this particular position? You said this was me. What about that was like, yeah, this is where I belong.
Leading with compassion, when it talked about that and offering service. So, being a social worker in the field for APS, that was the part I loved the most, was helping people, meeting people where they're at and offering services, connecting them. And then also, through the military, being a leader and coordinating efforts in the military for just any sort of response, being ready at any time to do your best. And it was just super enticing. And
I definitely appreciate that. We do have some comments in the chat. First, we have Michael that says superstar cast today. Bailey says, never seen Jared out there, but it's very nice to meet you, brother. You've been on for 2 months, so I take it you have to, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I take it you got to kind of figure out what's what. So what's your daily kind of duties like?
Yeah, they vary from day to day. Some days are very meeting heavy, and I'm in meetings a lot, and learning. And then other days I'll spend a lot of time with the outreach team, going from encampment to encampment. If people are saying stuff or we're getting information about an encampment in a certain area, that's gonna probably take a lot of my time, and that's where I'm gonna prioritize. And so been at the Silverdale RV encampment a lot, and obviously Veterans Park was right off the bat. So that was diving right in from the get-go. And I'm really happy that it was very successful with the help of Matt and his crew down there at KCR. They all came through, and at the end of the day, the best part of it, we led with compassion, and had a successful outcome.
Good. Now, since you're new, I'm going to phrase this, direct this question to Matt and Kirsten. This kind of popped into my head as Jared was talking. Do we know how many numbers of encampments exist in Kitsap County?
No, we don't. One of the challenges is that some are on private property and we don't necessarily know about those. Some are on public property and we're just starting to get a handle on those. Some are within city jurisdictions, and that's outside of what the county has a sort of authority over. And then encampments are moving and changing all the time. It's a really dynamic situation. So one of the projects is, two projects. One is to try to get a better sense of where all the encampments are, both like private and public land, and sort of what their disposition is, so how many people there are, knowing that this is constantly changing. And then we're also trying to work on, with KCR and the Housing Solutions Center, work on a by name list, which is a really considered to be a successful practice in outreach response to people experiencing homelessness. So we're trying to understand how people are moving around. So if Jared meets up with, Jim, who, has, whatever, Jim Smith at this park, and then a week later runs into the same guy, somewhere else at another encampment, we want to try to keep track of like how many people there actually are, so we're not double counting everybody. And then trying to make sure that even if the person moves, we can continue to try to connect them with resources, and have that sort of continuity of assistance or service to them. So we're excited to kind of dive in a little deeper and to have Jared's position in place so that we can focus a little more on data gathering about encampments. But at this point, I would not even venture to say how many there are.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Like I said, listening, and this is a learning experience for me. That was a question that popped in. We kind of talk about the RV park and veterans, but I know there's one like in the Illahee Preserve. I know they're kind of centered throughout. I think there was one behind the Walmart, but they've kind of cleared that out for new construction. So just definitely curious as to how many have been identified in the county. Matt, do you have any input on that? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree with everything Kirsten said, and we've got some strategies that we're trying to pilot, and the BNL or the by name list is one of those, and so that is on the track. Kirsten talked about the tracking side, but the other side of why we like to do this is it's not just we're not just taking numbers, right, and then we're actually knowing people's names, right, and so the idea of the BNL list or the by name list is that you actually have outreach workers that know these folks, and then we're really advocating for people, right? Because there's people and stories behind everyone that's in an encampment, and they have, an encampment really is their home. And so it's really trying to take that compassionate response, even if, our goal, right, for a lot of really good reasons, which Jared could talk about, sometimes encampments, have to close, right, for public safety or for, we have various issues in operations of the county, but it's how do we actually compassionately, move forward and help them, get to a spot that they want to go or would prefer to go. And so that's another reason of why we want to go towards a by name list, and also it's starting small, right? So we're going to probably start with a smaller number of encampments, and we really kind of did this with Veterans Park, right? So we kind of took like a micro case, and our goal was to really get to know everyone in there, and I think that was a lot of the success. That response wasn't perfect, right? I think there's all areas of improvement that we're all looking at how to get better. But overall, for how new the program is and how new all the players were, I think we're all really proud of what we did achieve, right? Given the circumstances and the dynamic. And I think part of that was a success of Jared and our kind of piece of the Heart team, which we can talk about in a second, is the outreach folks of getting to know people and actually getting their names and hearing their stories and building that trust and connection. And I think that's why, we had, I think it was like 85%, Jared, you correct me if I'm wrong, but of the folks we identified actually got to some type of housing destination, whether that's treatment, friends, family, or a hotel or housing program through KCR. So that's a piece of it. The other side that I wanted to add on with Kirsten's is the transient nature is whenever we do the pit counts, which we did, we do yearly, we missed one because of COVID, right? This is us. We're trying to, count as many people so we have an idea of the problem, but it's always very difficult, and it's kind of a stab in the dark. And I think it just shows, there's some areas that we've counted in past pit counts, and like this is a very active encampment, and then we'll come back a year later. And Kirsten's been doing this a while, and I know Kirsten, if you want to jump in on that, but it's a tough problem. But having a full-time team now, we hope to have a much better kind of handle on what the issue is, and hopefully this will actually help guide our pit counts going forward, and kind of everything will be a little bit better. But there's no way, right, to track everyone, and to actually know exactly, that's why, pit counts and even any estimation that we do will always be an undercount, right? And point in time count. Sorry for the.
I'm going to ask you to.
So I wanted to amplify something that Matt said, which is that in addition to hiring a Heart coordinator, we also contracted with Kitsap Community Resources for a dedicated encampment outreach team of 2 folks who are just phenomenal at what they do. So they're the ones who Jared works with really closely when he goes out and does kind of assessments or responses to encampments, they're the ones who, are the conduit for access to resources that are through the Housing Solutions Center. So they help people complete the paperwork to get enrolled with the Housing Solutions Center, and then the Housing Solutions Center helps figure out what kinds of resources those folks are eligible for. So it's a very important combination, I think, in order to make this all be as successful as possible and to be as compassionate as possible. As you can imagine, there's a huge amount of political pressure and public pressure to respond to encampments. We are the recipient of many concerned citizens and concerned residents calls, and so it's really helpful to have a specific sort of strategy that we're using to be able to respond to those. As I said earlier, our goal is to respond to each one individually. Each is a different situation, and there's different people living there, and their situations are different. So there's no one size fits all. We're trying to respond to each one sort of separately and individually. Sometimes it's like one or two people. Sometimes it's a larger situation like we had at Veterans Memorial Park. I know some of the biggest encampments are on private property right now, and they're not something that we have jurisdiction over. The HEART program is not law enforcement. We're not code enforcement. We don't have any ability to make people do things. We try to work with those other entities that have those responsibilities to make sure that there's some resources and some compassion also being brought to the table. But our role is really to facilitate coordination and try to make sure we have service providers at the table as well.
That's interesting, Kirsten. I didn't know that there were homeless encampments on private property. So that's I'm glad that you shared that information. We will get to the questions in the chat as we can. This one is for you, Jared. What do you foresee for this growing epidemic in regards to, I guess, homeless and homeless encampments?
Are they talking statewide or countywide, or?
I think we're talking countywide here.
Well, like we've said, that we're just starting out and we're growing, and I'm learning from people like Matt and Kirsten and all the different outreach people that I come in contact with. So as we grow, as I learn, we can have just a better response. We can. Another thing that I'm doing, so I'm putting together a map, and I'm mapping all the encampments throughout the county, so we can know about all that. In the future, wow, yeah, that's a tough one.
I don't think anybody can really predict what's going to happen. None of us could really predict where we are now from a couple of years ago, but we'll do our best to respond. I'm not going to pretend that this creates a whole bunch more resources, right? It doesn't necessarily create in and of itself. The HEART program doesn't create a bunch more shelter beds or housing programs, but we are also, the county is also investing additional funding in more programs. So we have really ramped up funding for the move-in assistance, for example, with Kitsap Community Resources. We've contracted with KCR to provide assistance with that first month, last month damage deposit, which is often a huge hurdle for people. You probably are aware, we've talked a lot in past episodes about the Kitsap Eviction Prevention Assistance Program, which is paying the back rents for thousands of families in the county, trying to get people caught up on rent and landlords caught up on what's owed to them. We launched a emergency motel program with Kitsap Community Resources. It is limited, but it's been very successful so far. I think Matt can talk more about that. And obviously we're working on the Mile Hill shelter program, which will add 75 beds of permanent shelter beds. So, we're trying to work in all different dimensions, but the reality is we just don't have enough resources for everybody who needs a place to be. Whether it's a permanent house or a shelter, we're still very short of those things. And so a lot of times it's a very creative problem solving situation with the individuals or with social service providers. What can we do? What would make this situation better for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And Bailey is asking or making a statement, which I think is a good one, which is there must be a lot of data thus far. So, is there a centralized data hub? Is there somewhere that folks can access and kind of see, the numbers? Because I think that is pretty important. And thank you for going through the list of different things that the county is executing and trying to work through this crisis for sure. Because a lot of us don't know that, so that's really important. Jump in there, Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the pandemic. I mean, it's Kirsten always says too, and I agree. Is the one thing we know for sure is that we don't know what's going to happen because it's been really unpredictable as far as funding, as far as the kind of waves of the pandemic, and it looks like that's kind of from right. There's the health side and then the economic side, and none of us are epidemiologists, but we do kind of see right. It does feel like it'll kind of spike up a little, then kind of settle back down. And then we do our best as far as our COVID measures. But I think maybe what the question I assume is about is kind of the economic kind of fallout and what we see happening. And I think one thing we've seen is the number of referrals as far as our KEPA program, the Kitsap Eviction Prevention Assistance, that's the rent assistance. We see a lot of referrals from our legal partners, meaning a lot of landlords are going through the eviction process, right, to get tenants out of their unit because of lack of payment of rent. But the problem is the program as it stands now is not going to last forever. We expect a lot of this is going to ramp down in the spring of next year. There's going to be a permanent program that does hang around for a little bit, but it won't be near the amount of assistance. And so we do expect that some of the economic conditions will get worse. And I at least here at KCR, we anticipate that there will be an increase in the number of folks that are entering the homeless system and potentially entering the encampments. We'll see what that looks like as it comes, but I do think we're not close to seeing the end of some of the economic fallout, and that's why we've so many organizations, are just ramping up services and continuing to try to build so that we can try to respond as much as we can. Like Kirsten said, there's not enough for everyone, but I do think that I want to give credit to the county, our team, Kitsap Mental Health, Kitsap Homes of Compassion, Eagles Wings, the Buy and For organizations. There's so many folks, the library, if you just come to the coalition, you see all of these wonderful organizations that are working so hard, and all of them, it's the same story. If they've increased capacity, we're trying to hire more people and to try to respond as best we can to kind of the economic crisis as it kind of continues to work through the system. So that's the only thing that I would add as far as I think it's going to get probably a little bit worse before it gets better in the long haul. But the nice thing is that some of these resources will not to the level, but some of it will hang around. We are hoping that some of these programs will have some type of permanent component so that at least we'll be better equipped than pre. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Kirsten.
I mean, only that, all of the funding is pretty much decided by our state and federal legislators, right? So the funding that this big sort of additional money that we have right now, which is related to homeless, to pandemic response, is all, granted by the federal government and to some extent the state government. They're the ones who hold the decision making about how much funding we get every year to try to parcel out, to stretch those resources as thin as we can to get the most assistance for people possible. So we don't, I just want to be clear for your listeners, we're not the ones who control how much money there is. We're the ones who try to make a decision how to use that money as best we possibly can, given the circumstances that we have here locally.
I think maybe
answer your question. I'm not sure. I feel like we got way off topic, but did we lose Marwan?
I think we lost Marwan, and sometimes this happens, and so
Okay.
I usually we just kind of continue to roll. But I
Okay.
do think there's some questions, so maybe we can, while we're waiting for Marwan to come back, we could go through some questions. Unless
Yeah.
you wanted to explain any more about the HEART program, we could go that
Yeah.
direction.
Sorry. So the question I'm just remembering now. The question that we were asked originally is about what data do we have, right? I think that was the question that came right before we got off on our tangent. And
Yes.
so I wanted to just loop back and make sure we answer that question. We are starting to collect data about encampments, as I mentioned. For people who get enrolled in case management and get enrolled through the Housing Solutions Center, we definitely have that data. It's part of the Homeless Management Information System. We really only have experience so far with closing one encampment, and that was at Veterans Park. We don't have all the data about where the encampments are yet or who's on the by name list. So remember, this program is only 2 months old, and we still have a long way to go to try to kind of gather information and collect that data that we love so much. If you want sort of data about the Housing Solutions Center and homelessness response in general in Kitsap, the County Housing and Homelessness Division website is full of data pages and data summaries and information like that. And we can respond to specific requests for data. So if there's some particular data thing that you're interested in and we don't already have it available, if it's a number that we can pull or some data that we can find in our database, we're happy to provide that. I think there was some questions in the chat. No, we can't access the earlier questions. I only can see the most recent ones, which are more statements about the challenges of not having things available. But there was a big question about Veterans Park, I think.
I can go back and I've got the questions.
You can? I can't see those.
So I think I'll go through and I can read and we can kind of tackle these.
You have more power than I do, Matt.
I think I maybe just clicked something. I don't know.
Oh,
but
okay. I can't see beyond. I can see like down to a bunch of comments from Bailey about no beds and there it is. Awesome. Great.
So I think the next question we're on from Bailey is how many have been housed and offered resources? So I don't have the exact date in front of me, but my estimate, and Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was about 15 to 20 in that range that were actually, we connected with a hotel and are actually being case managed and we actually took as a client. This is also one of the ways we're using the HEART team is we're actually pairing the encampment outreach with some of the new hotel program and with some of our high barrier case management. We call it the ROAST team. It stands for Recovery, Outreach, and Stabilization Team. But essentially, it's just a team that works with clients that have high needs, that have mental health, substance use, chronically homeless, comorbidities is, I think, the technical term for it. And so we've linked those programs together where we can. Now we don't have enough staff to cover everyone. So that's the limiting factor again is staff. And we're continuing to hire case managers, but that was a big start. So we started that with the Veteran Parks folks, as many as we could actually connect. And that's a big lift all at once, right? To take that many people and to case manage them. And so we're definitely figuring it out, but so far it's going pretty well. There's only been a few small number that have actually been asked to leave hotels, and we're continuing to work with our hotel partners and those clients on stabilization plans, and that work is unfolding, and that's really what our long-term goal is. And really what we're using some of these hotels for is folks that are in this category. The hotel program is not exclusively for HEART referrals or encampments, but that's one area that we are prioritizing, and we definitely are prioritizing the clients that are typically in an encampment, kind of that I just described. So, yeah, Jared or Kish, do you have anything to add about the resources or who was offered a resource?
I wanted to acknowledge that Marwan is back. And Marwan, we have valiantly carried on without you.
Thank you.
We're just sort of diving into Michael's question about Veterans Park. And there was also a question earlier. Oh, we lost Marwan again. Darn it. There was also a question earlier about sort of the HEART program in Martin versus Boise. So I thought what I might do with Jared's help is sort of step through what we did, what the response plan was for Veterans Park, and hopefully that can answer some people's questions. So the unauthorized encampments on county land does definitely take into account Martin versus Boise. As you can imagine, the county has a fairly substantial legal team that did a lot of analysis on Martin versus Boise and how it affects and influences what we can and can't do. They talked to a number of other counties and drew on other county encampment response kind of programs to try to draw the best out of what the other counties are doing and not include the things that aren't really working or aren't very effective. So that unauthorized encampment policy kind of lays out the specific requirements of steps that we have to do. And that includes, we have to post notices at certain intervals, letting people know about what's going to happen if the decision is made to close an encampment. We have to, post a notice a certain number of weeks ahead of time and just give everybody lots of warning. And then we post a second notice, a week ahead, and then we post a third notice. And so Jared went out with, the Parks Department and posted these colorful notices, like 50 notices throughout the park. We also, our plan also included doing a lot of outreach. And so Jared worked with the encampment outreach team from Kitsap Community Resources, an outreach team from Coffee Oasis, if there was any youth in the park. They worked with the roast team that Matt described, and also the REAL team, which is a new sort of behavioral health focused outreach team, and did a lot of outreach to folks living in the park. We had, Jared, you guys were out there like 2 or 3 times a week leading up to it, and then the week of, like every day, there was outreach teams out there trying to connect with people. The third thing that we did was offer alternatives to folks. So some people decided that they wanted to go into detox or drug treatment program. Some folks decided that they wanted to go back to their family and kind of try to reunite with their family. I think 1 or 2 people moved out of the county. They decided they wanted to go somewhere else. That was fine. We were happy to facilitate whatever people wanted to do. And then there was about 19 people, I believe I have a list here, 19 folks that over time, over the course of that outreach, enrolled with the Housing Solutions Center coordinated entry program, and were offered various different alternative living situations. So a couple people went to a shelter in Bremerton, and quite a few decided to go into the motel program, or the EMP, that was just launched by Kitsap Community Resources at that time. We kind of made a mistake in calling it a voucher program, because it's not really a hotel voucher program. That was a misnaming of the program on our part. It was never intended to be here's a voucher, you're on your own. It's a program where we use hotel motel rooms with intensive case management for folks who want that. And so a lot of the folks at the park were interested in that program, and KCR did an amazing job rustling up hotel rooms, going to great lengths to make that happen and getting people enrolled in that program. So by the end of the deadline for people to be out of the park, we pretty much everybody had moved out. There was nobody left. there was nobody, you know, had to interact with law enforcement or anything like that. People were just packing up their stuff. The Heart team, Jared, handed out plastic bags to help people pack up. We gave out duffel bags for people to help pack up their stuff who were moving to another location. People were given rides to different places that they wanted to go.
We helped pack up their personal items if they needed that, and if
store
they needed,
them, right?
if they needed storage for their personal items, we were able to provide that for up to, you know, currently I don't see an end to that. That we still have some people's stuff and their contact information and ready for them ready to give it back to them when needed. Yeah, it was a lot of work. It was over 80. I think I did the math. It was 85 human hours out there at the park between me and the outreach team. Became really well acquainted with all the residents there. A lot of them, the majority of them, were very happy with, you know, what we were doing. They're, you know, obviously it's not fun to move and to be in their situation, but the way that we did it slow, we did not rush anybody. It wasn't like, hey, today's D-Day, time to get out. No, most people on the day of were already out and in a hotel the night before. So a lot of smiles on the day of. They're happy to be helped into a hotel. And one guy even said to me, he goes, I can't wait to take a shower. I haven't had a shower in ages, and this provides me that opportunity. And so I still go down to the park probably at least once a week and walk the park looking for people to see if anyone's kind of moved back in, and you know, meet people early rather than let them get entrenched and comfortable there, and see what we could do from there.
The other thing I wanted to add to Jared's comment is that we also one of the biggest complaints was that there was just such a huge accumulation of waste at the park, and there was actually some seriously concerning issues with tents over the top of waterways, stream, and waste not being properly disposed of. And so we kind of followed up all of this assistance with relocation to do a massive cleanup of the park. Northwest Hospitality was involved with volunteers in the first cleanup. And then we had a contractor that specializes in kind of working with encampment cleanups. And they came in, and I think in total they removed almost 100,000 pounds of waste from Veterans Memorial Park. It's really an extraordinary difference from before to after, and the park looks like a park again. You know, it looks like a nice place where everybody can enjoy walking through the woods. So we considered it a really big success. There's definitely things to learn. Matt, I think there was a question specifically for you about the vouchers that were given out were 29-day vouchers and what happens after that. Do you think you could address that?
Yeah, I saw that. So the question, was that many unhoused in Veterans Park were given vouchers for hotels, 29 days. The sweep happened on April 29th. So that 29 days have passed. Where are those individuals now? What specifically would have been done if you did not have the hotel vouchers? I know for a fact not everyone was able to receive a voucher, as I was there talking to people and heard more than one person say they were not present at the times these vouchers were given out. How can someone that kept missing your team get a hold of one of these vouchers? Yeah. So there's a lot there and a lot of really good questions. So the first is, voucher is really not the right word. And Kirsten touched on this, right? This is part of it's a homeless service program that is part of a case managed program that as long as the folks are abiding by the hotel rules, right, and are kind of moving forward we work with them, and they can stay there. And so it's not like a housing choice voucher that's permanent. This program, it's hard to say exactly how long it'll last because it's at the leisure right now of the hotels. And sometimes the hotels are very lenient with what they allow and what they and are very attentive to clients. And other times they have pretty strict rules. So for some folks that are in some of the hotels that have stricter rules, that they might not be able to follow those rules for a variety of good reasons. And so their hotel stay has already ended. Most of the folks, that's not the case. And that's why we have case management paired to that. Most of these folks are part of our high barrier program. So what typically it looks like, we can't guarantee it for anybody. What typically looks like is around a year of hotel. This is what we try to do, is they have around a year of assistance, potentially in a hotel, or maybe it's treatment. It's a winding road and it's not one size fit all, but we try to work with them a year. And in that year is an intensive stabilization work. So it's, what are they connected with Social Security, right? If they qualify, are they connected with DSHS, right? Do they have food stamps? What are their mental health goals, right? What are their substance use goals, right? We have a harm reduction approach to try to deal with whatever path the client wants to go down, with the ultimate goal of leading to housing stability. But with a lot of these clients, we find is it takes time, especially when they're coming from chronic homelessness, to adjust, right? To even stabilize, and to even be able to interact and to engage with a private market rental, or more typically a subsidized unit with Bremerton Housing Authority or Housing Kits app. For a lot of folks, especially ones that have disabilities or issues that they're not able to work, and many do, is that's a track of stabilization for a year, and then it's trying to move to what's a long-term resource, right? That is appropriate and is sometimes a voucher, right? That could be a housing choice voucher. It can be a project-based voucher or a subsidized unit. So some of the words that got out about 29 days, that was, I believe, again, is a little bit of a miscommunication between the folks that were initially talking to folks about some of our outreach and some of our outreach workers. And what they're initially talking is it's a just trial run at the hotel, right? The client needs to abide by the hotel's rules. And if that's going forward, then that program continues. And then that's when now we're looking at hopefully getting to the year mark. But that won't necessarily be the case, because housing is a winding path, right? Much like the recovery world. So many of the folks we're extending because they are abiding by the rules, and they're working with case managers, and they're working with the hotels, and the hotels are being really good partners. But there's a few that's not. So that's kind of a complex answer, and not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but that's kind of the nature of working with hotels and not having control over the housing program, is that we really have to be respectful of the hotel owners and kind of their concerns, and because it is their property, right? And it's their hotel, and they have a responsibility to maintain that, and to potential other guests as well. So that's some of the dynamic, but most of the folks that we put in hotels are there. I think like 80% are still there right now. And we are working with them and extending. So it's not, I think, again, what we were trying to communicate and not overpromise, because we can't guarantee that hotel stay, especially because it's contingent on some client behavior. So that's when we started with 29 days as really just communicating to the client, here's the trial run. But what some people interpret that as is the program's only 29 days and everyone has to leave. And I understand that miscommunication, but that's not the case, is they don't necessarily have to leave at 29 days. And we are extending those folks with the goal. And that's why we're limited right now with who we can take on, because we don't just cycle through. We stick with these folks, especially our high barrier program. We stick with them for the long term. So a lot of these folks now, we are committed and they're on a caseload, right? Is if they do exit the hotel, they stay on our caseload, and we're now finding other options. So we are committed to those folks that we take on to finding a permanent housing solution, unless they turn down our help, right? Which sometimes happens, but pretty rarely. So that's what we've now made a commitment, that we're going to case manage these folks until we find a longer term solution, or they decline services. So that's some of the limitations. But Yeah. Any questions about that? That's a lot there.
Let me jump in here, Matt.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, thank you, the three of you, for coming on. I think it's really important. Like you said, there's going to be miscommunication, and there's also telephone gamism, right? So if one person hears something one way and they tell the next person, then that's what gets articulated out. And so here we're able to, say what is and what isn't. You already mentioned, hey, you're starting made, and there's always ways to improve things, but creating this dialogue and a space for people to ask questions and get the answers and say, oh, hey, this isn't evil empire. They're doing what they can, I think, is tremendously important in building relationship with the community and folks that are also very passionate and empathic for this population of folks that many entities and individuals are trying to serve. So thank you, Kirsten, Jared, and Matt, for coming on and doing that. Now, I can't see the previous chat, so if there's more questions in there, please go ahead and respond to those. But Bailey has one here that I can see. That does the HEART program have policies implemented, and does that affect your line of work as far as advocating on behalf of the most marginalized population? I don't know if you answered that, but that's the most recent one that I can see.
We do have a policy. I think Kirsten touched on that. It's the encampment policy on county properties policy. And does it affect it? It guides my work. It's basically defines everything from words like encampment to storage policies. So it's what I lean on when it comes to a cleaning of an encampment. But I feel like we can grow, and we're going to expand it, and we're going to see what works in the future, and learn from mistakes in the past and develop it even more thoroughly. But I love it. I think it's very well written, very well thought out, very obviously driven by case law, but also with a compassionate approach to it. So
yeah, I think that's really helpful. Kirsten, you mentioned something earlier. Do you have any updates on the Port Orchard location? How is that coming? I think you were talking about maybe the end of this year or next year potential opening.
I think so. I mean, we're still in the process right now of preparing. So we have to apply for 3 different permits through the county permitting system, and we don't get any like breaks, or it's not easier for us just because we're a sister department to the Department of Community Development. So we have to apply for 3 permits, different ones. One is a land use permit. So that property is zoned already, and the zoning is for urban high intensity commercial purposes. So you can, on that piece of property, you can basically do a wide range of different things, everything from an auto dealership to a bar to a fitness center. I mean, there's just a huge number of different things you could do on that property. But in addition to the zoning, there is sort of what is that property currently being used as, or its currently land use is recreational center. And we have to apply for a permit to change that use to be a shelter. And so the first permit is a land use permit. It's called a administrative conditional use permit. And it says this is what we want to use this property for, and it is allowable within that zoning. The second permit we have to apply for is a site development activity permit. And so because that you have to apply for anytime you're changing anything on the outside of a building. So what we're changing is we're adding some sort of walkways and pathways to make it more ADA accessible. So for people who need mobility aids, we want them to be able to get to the different areas outside on the property. We're changing where the emergency vehicles are parking. We're doing things like that are relatively minor changes, but they still require us to do a site development activity permit, or an SDAP. And then the third permit we have to apply for is a building permit, and that has to do with the changes that we're making inside the building. So we are adding a little bit of offices. We're adding showers and toilets and sinks because we want to make sure we have plenty for everybody who's going to be staying there. And we have to be in compliance with county code around the number of bathrooms, toilets, showers for the number of people. We're adding a sprinkler system and a fire suppression system and fire alarm system to make sure that it's super safe for everybody. We're repartitioning a couple of the walls, but again, they're, in the grand scheme of things, pretty minor changes, but they do require that we submit a permit and tell the county what all the things that we want to do are. And then after we have all those permits in place, then we can put out requests for proposals for a contractor to do the work to carry out all the things that we've got permission to do. So where we are right now in the process is we're working with an architect and engineering firm. We've hired Rice Fergus Miller, which is a downtown Bremerton architecture firm, and they're partnering with an engineering firm, which is right down the street from the Mile Hill property. And they are working on helping us develop the permit application materials for that first permit, which is the land use change permit.
So, Kirsten, how long does it take for a permit?
We're still pretty far out from actually even doing the work to change the building. What is the really unknown and what makes it very difficult to predict when it's going to be open is how long is it going to take for those permits to get approved?
That was my question.
How long is it going to take once we have a contractor for them to get the materials and get the labor on site to do the work? And so those are two giant question marks right now. And so I wish I could say we know it's going to be done by this time, but I don't know the answer to either one of those yet. And so we're moving it forward as fast as we possibly can. I feel urgency. I stay awake worrying about this project at night personally and wanting it to get done as fast as I can. And we're working within all of these like parameters that we don't have control over. So that's the status on that project.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that out, because people have their own preconceived notions on what's happening or what's happening. And just to give an example, we don't use our rent money to buy pizza. Another example would be, I was working at the college, they were going through budget cuts, but at the same time, their state-of-the-art theater was being built, and many of the students were really frustrated at that. So they're like, okay, there's these budget cuts, but we see this new construction over here. This department is having a party, and where's all this money coming from? And these things are earmarked for different projects, and they can't be switched over and used over here. You can't borrow from Peter to pay Paul. That's not how it works. And we've got to keep those things straight so that you don't have misappropriation of funds and fraud and everything else. So, the county doesn't just get to knock on the door and say, hey, just give me this permit. So I think it's important to share that so people understand how these things work. So they're not thinking, hey, you're the county. Why don't you just give yourself permission and just knock it out? And that's just not how it goes.
Marwan, can I just add one more thing onto what you just said? Because I think it's super important. So to your point about different, about sometimes the public perception is, oh, you have all this money. If you can do this project over here, why can't you do this project over here? Like, for example, people say, well, you have all this money to fix our roads. Why can't you put that money towards homeless shelters, right? And that's a valid question. Like in a bigger picture society, elected leader question, that is a really good question. But the way that money comes to us at the county level is in very specific buckets with very specific allowable uses. So for example, even within our homeless crisis response system funding, we'll get a grant from the state. The state legislature will decide we want to fund rental assistance, and we're going to give you X amount of dollars for rental assistance. We can only use that money for rental assistance. We can't use that money for shelter operations, right? We might get a different grant that is for shelter construction. We can only use it to build a shelter or remodel a shelter. We can't use it for shelter operations. So we tend to get our money in these like really specific buckets. Same with roads, like they'll get a grant specifically that they can only use for this road project, or they'll get a grant for the parks department to only, they can only use it for this park project. So it makes it one of the things that's really been difficult about all of the pandemic time is that we've gotten all this new money coming in that can only be used for these certain things. And so we're constantly trying to figure out, okay, given the restrictions on this use of funds, how do we best use that in our community, given the resources that we have and the partners that we have? So I know it can sometimes feel frustrating from the outside perspective of like, why are you choosing to spend your money this way? But honestly, it's almost always because that's the rule. Like we're given that restriction on how we can use our funding.
Right. And in those
And
conversations,
then we'll pass that down to like KCR. We contract with KCR, and the state says only spend it on, rental assistance. And so we contract with KCR or, the housing authorities to only spend it on rental assistance, and then they have to follow those rules. So it's a very highly regulated environment that we're operating in.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take this next comment from Michael. It says, thank you all for your answers. I have to start my drive home, so I can't respond, but I will still be listening. Other questions I have: upon deciding to do a sweep, what would be done if there was not enough guaranteed housing for the unhomed? What info can I hand people in order to get a hold of some of your services? And is there a way I could hold a presentation similar to this one on the 23rd Democratic General Meeting? I'll be listening in the car, and thank you all.
Yeah, I guess I can start. Some of that's HSC, so I can jump in. And this was actually a little bit of the question I answered earlier, Michael, and I think I missed some of the pieces of it. So thank you for looping back up, because I think, yeah, you asked if there's not resources available, what will be done, and that is it is tricky. So with the hotel program, we need case managers, right? So there's some limitation on how many folks we can take at once, and each case manager holds between 15 and 30 folks, depending on the level of vulnerability. Because a lot of these clients need case managers that are available, right? That can work with them, can really help them solve the problems that they want to solve, right? And I listed some of those issues earlier, and all of that takes time. And so that's why, depending on who's on the caseload, we have to cap the caseload of each of our case managers at some point. And so that's why there is some limitation right now, because we have staffing limitations. Usually it's the other way around. Usually we always have funding limitations, right? Not staffing. And so now it's a kind of a weird, pandemic time. We do anticipate we'll be able to spend majority of this money down. We are spending a lot of money, but it's just, we're in that moment right now where we have some staff. So yes, there theoretically could be encampments going forward that we might not be able to offer specific hotel services because of staffing limitations. We're working on addressing that right now, but that is where we work with partners. We had a meeting just the other day where we have some limitations right now, but Catholic Community Services and their HEN program, that's the housing and essential needs. So that serves folks that have disabilities and that qualify typically under the ABD, the age blind disabled kind of welfare program through DSHS. And so they're able in some cases to offer case management. So there's maybe some partnership that we can do. And there's also other programs outside the hotel program. So we have multiple other programs. We have actually many. And I'm with the help of Gather Together, Grow Together, we're actually having a presentation on how kind of KCR works, designed for service providers, on the 17th. So I'll do a plug for that. But that is so there is so there's a lot. It's complicated how we work, but I think the short answer to the question is that we have limitations, but we'll address that either with other programs, other partner agencies. And then I think that would also dictate Jared and Kirsten's response in that specific plan to address that encampment. So if there was really not resources available, I'll let you chime in, Kirsten and Jared. I think that would then affect, are you actually going to close the encampment or not? And that would kind of guide that specific policy. Do you guys want to follow up?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that's why each encampment is a different situation. In some cases, we are not moving forward on closing it right away or even at all. Sometimes that's not what is needed or the best case scenario. And so what other resources are available? What's the situation of the people living there? Kind of what's the time frame? How many? Where are they? All of that goes into trying to figure out the best compassionate response, while at the same time we have, a lot of political and community pressure to take action. And so we're put in a very difficult position trying to, navigate all of these different concerns about how to best help people not be living in an encampment. So I don't have a definitive answer for you on that, but I hope that one of the things that you're taking away from this presentation and this meeting is how hard we are all working to try to help people. KCR and the outreach team are just rock stars, amazing. And Jared is just doing a tremendous job in tackling a very complicated and expansive new position that we're just trying to figure out how it all works. And, our division, the Housing and Homelessness Division, is really committed to trying to make as many resources as possible available for people. And there's other interests at work here too. We have law enforcement, we have private citizens who don't want encampments on their property. We have private citizens who complain about encampments that they see in their parks and public property. And so we have to work within all those different parameters to come up with something that we think is going to, try to address the issues.
And then I think the second and third part of that question, sorry, Marwan, I just want to make sure I feel like I've having a bad habit of only answering part of the question. So what info can I hand people in order to get more information? We have some placards, so if you want to come to 1201 Park Avenue, we have kind of some one sheets of information. All our services, especially on the housing side, flow through the Housing Solutions Center. That's coordinated entry for Kitsap County. And so they're really the experts, and they're under our organization as well, but they operate a little bit separately because they're referring to services. So that's always a good place to start, and they can give you some information, and they're at 1201 Park Avenue. And is there a way that I could hold a presentation similar to this one at the 23rd Dem General Meeting? I'm assuming that's maybe the Democratic General Meeting. I know... we've done a lot of different presentations, so I think I'm not sure what that request is, but if you want to follow up, maybe we can make something happen. But I know Kirsten and we present at different community groups, and we're always open to talking with folks about what's happening. So just wanted to follow up on that last piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not exactly sure what the request is, but we're happy to come and talk to whatever group. We talk to Rotary and Seroptimist and Elks and school groups, and whoever wants to talk to us, we're pretty much available to provide information about what we're doing. And Jared has worked up a really nice PowerPoint presentation about the HEART program also, which is something that we could give.
Yeah, what I would offer is, if there's logistical issues, I can offer this platform where we can broadcast live for everyone if they couldn't make it in, but could still answer questions. So just that offer is open, Matt and Kirsten and Jared. Now, there was a question about how to access, and Kirsten mentioned Kitsap One. Jared, do you know what Kitsap One is? Can you describe that to me? Because this is the first time I've heard of Kitsap One. So
so initially what we found is that Kitsap One didn't necessarily distinguish. They sent all their encampment stuff over to solid waste, and we're working on a better routing to get it to me rather than it going to solid waste. And so basically what they do is they direct all the different questions and requests of the county to the correct location, correct department. I saw that you put the phone number up and the email up in the box below. And currently we're working on questions. to better get the correct referrals over to me.
And just globally, globally, Kitsap One is a way that the county kind of set up for residents to be able to ask questions of the county government or express concerns or, get information. And so it's like a switchboard, except for it's operated by like real live human beings in Kitsap County. So you can call and ask a question about when's the next commissioner meeting, or I can't find XYZ thing on your website, or I have a concern about this pothole, or whatever it is. You can just call this one number or email, and they will ask, like, try to get some clarification, and then they'll route your concern or your question or request for information to the appropriate person in the county who can answer that. So if a resident calls and says, I've got a concern about an encampment, it'll get routed to me or Jared, and then we will respond directly to the person.
So is it fair to say that it's like kind of like a non-emergency line? Don't call 911, call Kitsap One and answer those questions.
It is. It's not. It's and it's only for county business, right? So if you live in the city of Bremerton, we're not going to be able to answer a Bremerton question. I mean, they'll be able to tell you, hey, that's a Bremerton question. You have to talk to the city of Bremerton. But for any county business, that's set up. It's actually one of the most sort of successful and well-respected kind of call center programs in the state. It was a very early call center, and others have come to emulate it. So it works really well. And we have a really cool, slick interface internally where it's all electronically routed to us. And then we get a prompt to respond to a concern or a question. And then we can respond to it. And then we note that it's been responded to. And so it's all tracked. It's works really well.
I think that's fantastic. I know sometimes it can be difficult trying to surf through a website and find the information. So to be able to call and get live help is great. Kitsap One is open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And for those that are listening and not watching, their phone number is 360-337-5777. Or you can email the help desk at help@kitsapone.com. Now, there was another question in the chat, and that was from Bailey. It says, can we transfer our efforts from the heart program and KCR to the old Bremerton Hospital? That awesome solution. Do we know what's happening with the Bremerton Hospital, and is that something that could happen?
It's funny. I was just chatting on the phone with somebody about that today. A citizen resident here called and asked about that. So we get quite a few questions and inquiries about it. I guess I would say a couple things. First of all, the property is still owned by the parent organization of Harrison Hospital, so it's really up to them what they want to do with the property. The last I heard, they were planning to demolish that building. A couple of years ago, when this idea was originally floated, and the hospital announced that it was going to be moving operations to St. Michael in Silverdale, I know some very knowledgeable folks about affordable housing went and looked at the building and did kind of an assessment of, hey, this could be really good. Could we turn it into affordable housing? And their conclusion when they walked away is that the necessary remodeling and upgrades and life and safety upgrades that would be needed would make it prohibitively expensive. It would be not worth using that existing building because it needs, a new HVAC system and earthquake straps and like all the different things that it needs to get it kind of up to code for people to live there. So that's the last I heard about it, but there still continues to be interest in that. And I always encourage people to talk to the city of Bremerton if that's something that you're interested in pursuing. Again, it's not in county property, so we don't have any jurisdiction over it or decision-making about what happens to it. But the city would need to permit somebody to take that building, and a significant amount of money would need to be raised to purchase the property and then do the remodels that are needed. But
Kristen, do you know if it's up for sale?
I don't think it's up for sale.
Oh, gotcha.
Not that I'm aware. I don't know everything, but I haven't seen that it's up for sale. So that would, I don't know what Harrison or their parent organization's plans are for that property either. But if there's people have questions, there's certainly other people that you could ask who may know more than I do.
It is a massive amount of square footage. That would make a wonderful place for a huge apartment complex of affordable living.
Agreed.
That
would be great. Even if somebody just bought property and knocked the building down and built a bunch of new affordable housing, that would be amazing. So.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is, KCR, we've gone through a little bit of that of buying properties and renovating them. And just like Kirsten said, I know from the outside, right, unless you're really in the kind of construction and affordable housing and developing world, it does seem really crazy of like, hey, there's all this, right? We need so many rooms. Why not just turn this space or this space, right? And just like Kirsten was saying, is it can turn into a really, really expensive project where, very quickly you can get to a place where you would have been a lot cheaper to demolish and rebuild something, right? Rather than continue to sink money into repairs. So that's where it gets really tricky, and why sometimes nonprofits or the county or whoever it is or developers don't jump on those projects, because things do cost money, and sometimes things can be really, really expensive to rehab. So it really is a case by case basis.
In the earlier show, one of the things that we were talking about was Habitat for Humanity has a program where folks help to build their own house, and they'll have folks that will come and help them. And there's a saying, many hands make light work. And we played an Amish video of them building a barn, 30 or 40 folks out there, and they built this thing in a day. And I wonder if some of these unique kind of solutions can be implemented to cut down on the cost. Could we do a call into the community and say, hey, would you be willing to come out here and help us property and cut down on the labor, and just have to deal with the purchase of the land or the leasing of the land and buying the materials? It just seems like we're going to have to find some really unique ways to really tackle this homelessness crisis. I know I would be willing to come and swing a hammer and do what I could.
That'd be
Marlon,
great.
You already do plenty, so thank you very much.
Well, and all of you, and Matt and I were talking about you finally getting a little bit of help, Kirsten, and how much you do, and so it's a blessing to hear that you were able to gain a few positions to have support. And when you do come on, and we have to schedule that to talk about who you are and all that you do and all the things that you oversee, I think that too will be very illuminating, right? That so many are doing so much with so little resources, that when you really pull that back and look at it, it's amazing as to how much actually gets accomplished.
Yeah, and I thank you, Marwan. I appreciate the compliment. It's always, I'm always grateful to get recognized for all the hard work that is happening. But I have to say that it is really a team effort, and I'm incredibly grateful to the amazing team that we have in the Housing and Homelessness Division. We have 5 people now, and each one is just stellar, rock star, amazing at their job, and is a pleasure to work with. And so we're just really lucky, like personally, to get to work with such great people, but also as a community, as a county, to have such amazing public servants working on your behalf to try to help make these programs work, and to make sure we have these resources available. So we're very lucky on many levels. And Jared is one of those amazing people in our division that is just dived in with amazing, just amazing capacity to absorb information and to make connections, and to, really exemplify what we're trying to do with this program with compassion. And he's bringing all kinds of skills and information and knowledge that he had from before his earlier jobs to help this position be successful. So we're just super grateful that we've got Jared on the team.
As we wrap up and kind of give our final thoughts and cover anything that we missed, again, I do want to acknowledge all the work that's being done. I do ask everyone that's listening to continue to be critical, ask questions, get involved. Your voices do need to be heard. And at the same time, to me, there's so many folks that are really doing a lot of good work, individuals, organizations, government agencies. Uh, but there is a sea change. Folks are really trying to find new ways to be collaborative. And this is one of the spaces that's taking place. And so I just encourage more people to bring their voice to the table, because that is where we're going to solve the problem, right? Together, not siloed off, not looking across the aisle and saying, this is what I see, but I'm not really sure what it is. And maybe some of that does exist, and maybe it's a blind spot. But through grace and conversation and involvement, we can try to, tackle this issue and other issues as effectively as possible. We do more with more. So please get involved. Jared, I want to check in with you as we kind of wrap it up. And just kind of give us your thoughts and how was your experience today?
Well,
I don't know if you
I,
what you thought of this coming
yeah,
in, and did that meet your expectations? Did you survive? Will you be back again?
I'm when it comes to stuff like this, I am less of a talker. I like to get out there and meet with people. And as you probably get to know me, I talk a lot, and but I like to learn, and I don't like to just spout out stuff, and I'd rather let the experts like Matt and Kirsten really let their expertise shine, and I'm soaking it in. Like Kirsten said, I'm definitely learning a lot, taking notes as I go, and it's a lot to learn. And I've met a lot of great people, both in the county and the partners that I've met. County's full of great people. I've worked for government agencies my entire adult life of work, and it's the best I've worked for yet, and so many knowledgeable people, but everybody seems passionate that I've come across with in the county. And then as for KCR, it's kind of the same, a lot of passionate people, and it's just a really great place to work, and I feel lucky and to be in the position to do this job. And I hope to not let anyone down, and I could bring as I grow and I learn, and I just want to be successful and do the best job that I can. And it's something that I'm conscious of, like, hey, I got to do a good job. And every day I'm thinking about how can I get better? How can we grow? And how can, what can I bring, and what I'm thinking outside the box all the time. I'm throwing ideas to Kirsten all the time. And I think a lot of the stuff that we keep coming back to is staying within our scope, not going outside of the scope of what the Heart Team is intended for and our purpose, but still, how can we best and most effectively meet people where they're at?
Jared, my invitation to you is, as situations come up, this platform is available to you. I think what can be helpful, and I've kind of heard this, a few times now with Veterans Park and then with the RV park, is folks have, their ideas on what is happening or what isn't happening. And so we need that bridge of dialogue and discussion to say, well, this is what's happening, this is how it's happening. We're not doing these people or whatever the key to build that relationship, right? Because I think that piece is important, and it only gets in the way if folks don't have the clear picture, right? And again, there may be some different solutions, different resources that other folks could have brought to bear if that conversation was kind of in an open space, and it's not kind of this afterthought where folks are looking at the situation like, hey, these folks are doing something wrong and this is the issue. So that is open to you for the next encampment where that may come up. and just to make sure that the information is accurate and people are as a community to kind of together in how things work. So thank you so much for coming on, Matt. I want to get your word.
Oh, thank you. I think yeah, maybe I'll end with the on the compassionate side is I think it's we all work really hard to be as compassionate as possible, especially when encampments have to close. And I think maybe for folks in the community that are frustrated with how some of this went, especially if those that are worried about and not closing encampments fast enough. I would just say is encampments, there's a whole spectrum of them. Some are very dysfunctional, some are actually pretty supportive communities. And so when we're displacing folks, it's just keep in mind that in some cases we're actually displacing neighborhoods, right? We're actually displacing a lot of people that have a support network around them. And that's really difficult. And that's why we have all of these folks. That's why we have a heart team. We have Jared, we have Kirsten, myself, our outreach navigators, our housing team, the real team, Agape, the sheriff. You have all these agencies that are expending tremendous amount of time to do this with care, because it's a really difficult thing when you're taking folks out of an environment that they're comfortable and feel safe, and then offering them different places to go, right? That can be a big transition. And that's why we try to do it carefully, and we try to do it respectfully and with as much dignity as we can, because it's a really tricky and complex process and task.
All right, I appreciate that, Matt. And you want to let folks know what's happening next Wednesday on the Conduit?
Yeah, so I think I know Marwan is excited about filming at least the public presentation for the Kitsap Housing Homeless Coalition. And so hopefully we'll make those more accessible. We're going to talk about maybe the whole thing, but we're going to try to get some feedback from members. So really excited to be doing that. And then on Friday, for those that are interested, I'll keep plugging it, is we've gotten a lot of feedback of how does KCR work, right? We have a lot of service providers asking. And so Marwan and I filmed a piece of it. And so we're going to air that next Friday at 1. And we'll also be available in the live chat to answer questions. So I know there's a lot of folks asking what is going on, how's it working? And also during the Housing Coalition on Wednesday, I'll be doing a piece of that presentation and inviting those staff members that want more information to the Friday meeting. So yeah, all is kind of working together, and I appreciate you, Marwan, for helping us get a lot of communication and training out to folks. And the training on Friday will also be on the Conduit's YouTube. So any staff that can't make it can tune in later and can watch it and get that information.
Yeah, it'll also be on our website also. So stay tuned for that. And again, that's next Friday, not this Friday. I have back surgery this Friday. Next Friday.
Next Friday.
So stay tuned for that. The 17th at 1 p.m., correct?
At 1 p.m., yeah.
All
and then
right.
the coalition meetings next Wednesday at 2 p.m.
At 2 p.m. Oh, yeah, I'm going to come on early. I got to remember that. So the show will start at 2, not 3 next week. So I will do an update on that. Thank you so much, as always, Matt. Kirsten, I so love that you carve out time in your busy schedule to come on, once a month during our deep dive week, of all weeks, which is fantastic because you have so much information and insight to share with everyone. And I know you have a few other things, so I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you, Marwan. I just really appreciate what you're trying to build here, what you have built and what you're building in this new conduit of information, which is so important in our community. When we want to get information out to the public about what's happening, we're really limited. We can do it on our webpage, we can do it on Facebook. We have a little bit of BCAT, right? The Bremerton Community Access Television, but we don't have a radio station in Kitsap. We don't have like a really big public TV station. So it's just really awesome to have another way to be able to communicate with people who want to know what's going on. What I wanted to just add as a closer is, working our way through this. We're still learning about how to do encampment response. We're still making new community partnerships. So for example, today, Jared and I met with the Central Kitsap School District's McKinney-Vento representatives to talk about what happens when we come across school-aged children in encampments and how we can coordinate with the school districts to make sure that those children continue to get access to the schools so they can have that continuity of education. So that was like another great partnership to kind of, learn about and develop. So if you're a person who's listening and you think of another organization or partnership or connection that would help make this work better, please reach out to myself or Jared and let us know. And we're happy to work with more organizations. And then the last thing I wanted to say is just a little specific pitch, which is that we have some folks who are living in RVs that their RVs are broken. And we need to find some kind of mobile RV mechanic who is willing to come out and just do an evaluation of what it would take to get the RV repaired again. And that is becoming a really huge problem for us as we work with folks living in RVs, and they literally aren't drivable. They can't move them, and they can't get them to a place to get them fixed, and they don't know how much it's going to cost to get it fixed. And so it's just this huge issue. So my pitch is, if you who are listening know of anybody who's a mobile mechanic or would be willing to come and work with us and do some just assessments on these RVs, that would be super helpful to helping find a way forward for the folks living in them to get a better, stable situation. So again, if you know of anybody or have an idea, reach out to Jared or me, and we will take any and all creative ideas on this. So that's my pitch. Thank you.
And Kirsten, is the preference is to use Kitsap One for that?
People can reach out to me or Jared directly on that, and I can put our contact information.
All right, so Kirsten's gonna put that information in there, and again, the need is for a mobile RV tech, someone to come to the location and do an assessment on the vehicles, which are their homes, right? So
Right.
that is huge.
And that's a big barrier for them right now. They don't even, it's so overwhelming to not even know what the problem is or how much it's going to cost to fix it. And so if that's something that we collectively as a community can help with, then we can start trying to figure out how we can get money to help them. How is it worth fixing it? If so, how can we raise money to help make those repairs? So yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much. I think you've got
it's got to be tremendously stressful to have a home that you need to have fixed, and you have no way to get help to fix it. Is there a pocket of funds for that, Kirsten? I know you were talking about trying to find some unique ways.
Yeah,
if you can identify it, but is there funding?
I think we could probably find some funding for the assessment. I don't know about. It depends on how much the repairs are and what sort of funding pot that would be eligible out of. Jared has called around to a number of RV repair businesses, and none of them will come to us to do the assessment. So that's why we're reaching out kind of more broadly to the public to say, do you know anybody, or do you own a business that would be willing to make an exception and help for these specific folks? But I think we could come up with a little bit of money to help compensate somebody if they were willing to come and do those assessments within reason, of course.
Got you. That's really unfortunate that folks this is a pocket of potential money for you, new customers, especially with the county. It's like not a one-off. So yes, if you know anyone, please get that information out there. Again, for those of you that are listening and not watching, Jared's email is jmoran@kitsap.gov. Kirsten's email is kjewel with 2 L's at kitsap.gov. All right. So I thank you so much again to the audience that joined us today for all of you that asked nice, good questions, hard questions, right? They didn't duck or dodge from the questions that were out there. For those of you that watch this at another time, if you do have questions, you can type them in the chat, or you can reach out directly to those individuals. But if you type it in the chat, I will forward on your questions or comments. And then, of course, I want to thank the panel today. Michael said it at the very beginning. What an awesome panel, and all of you are awesome. So I appreciate you. For Kirsten Jewell, for Jared Moran, and for Matt Garrett, I am Marwan Cameron. This is the Conduit. Have a good week, everyone, and we'll see you.